Good evening, friends, and thank you for coming to another night with Behind Black Business. That is the podcast for our organization, Repair, Restore, and Grow Black Communities. And tonight we have another special guest, another gem in our community, Arnell Brady. He is a speech language pathologist. And I know many people have had speech therapy in school, possibly, or speech therapists in clinical settings. But a lot of people do not know what a speech pathologist really is and how dynamic this profession really is. And so, Arnell, I want to thank you very much for coming tonight.
It's my pleasure.
Absolutely. So, as you know, Repair, Restore, and Grow Black Communities, we're a nonprofit organization, and we're a few people who have come together to make a difference in our community. We need to circulate dollars in our community, and we know that that's not happening. We have people in our community with businesses that are not reinvesting any of the dollars or the profits that they're receiving from our community. And that's why a lot of our communities looks the way they do. And before I started this organization, I drove around different areas in Chicago to our many different communities. I even went over into Indiana and even traveling to other cities in this country. And I see the same thing. Boarded up buildings, no entertainment for the children, just a lot of poverty and a lot of our people not owning the businesses. But we do actually have a lot of businesses out here. There are a lot of Black businesses out here. And that's something else that I discovered as I walked the pavements. And we don't know about those businesses because we're creatures of habit. We go to the same place for things that we want, and we don't seek out our Black businesses. And so that's why we have this podcast, because we want to feature the many businesses that we have in this city. And many of our businesses, our Black businesses, have been out here for 50, 60. We have, I think the top that I have seen has been 67 years. And I think that's Lem's Barbecue over on 75th Street. But why are we supporting our Black businesses? Because our Black businesses are more likely to hire our people. They are more likely to use other Black businesses for their services. They serve as role models for our children. They're more likely to invest in certain projects and interest in the community. You go to some of these other stores, they don't want to hire you. They don't want to invest. And this is pretty much across the board. And we know that this is a country of immigrants, and people come here from other countries for a better way of life. Many of them are trying to get away from a lot of turmoil. And so they're not interested in our struggle here. But that's unfortunate, and it's unfair, because it is our struggle that has put the opportunities that they have on the map. Is our struggle. And we talked about immigrants last week. And one of the things that we discovered is during the civil rights movement, when they put, when Johnson was getting ready to sign the civil rights bill, it also opened up the door for immigration, because they were dealing with the issue of racism. And this country was not letting people from other countries into the United States. But once they signed that civil rights bill, then everybody was coming over here, and everybody was coming over here talking about civil rights. And we're still fighting for civil rights. And so that's why we started this organization. We are also, we have been able to raise dollars to help two businesses, one on the west side of Chicago, Fifth City Preschool, and one on the south side of Chicago, which is the House of Music, uh, build a website. Our organization funded that project for them. And we have more dollars that we want to put towards business management because many of our people need to learn how to run a business. Improving the decorum is where other dollars will go. And we're still addressing the public policy issue when we want our local libraries and our schools to get contracts with our Black bookstores. We used to have 24 Black bookstores here in Chicago, but right now there are three. There's Semicolon on the north side. There's the Underground in in Chatham, and there's Frontline in Hyde Park. And then we also acknowledge Afriware in Maywood. And we feature a Black bookstore on our website every month, and we have a book giveaway from that book every month. So the book that we're giving away this month is Message to the People by Marcus Garvey. And Marcus Garvey imparts in that book to read, never stop reading, educate yourself, and re-educate yourself. So one of our subscribers will win that book. All you have to do is subscribe to our website at rrgbc.org, and you will have an opportunity to win that book. So that's what we're about. And so tonight we're going to talk with Arnell Brady about the profession of speech pathology. And Arnell, I'd like for you can give an introduction, of yourself, and we'll start off with that.
Sister Harrington, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk about something that I truly love. I am a licensed certified speech language pathologist. I have been in business in private practice for this year will be my 39th year.
Wow.
And I am based primarily in the Chicago area, although I've been licensed in California, Arkansas, Georgia, and Indiana. The Department of Labor says that the speech language pathologist is the expert, is the recognized expert in oral language.
Mm-hmm.
And oral language, to me, is the most powerful weapon on this planet. It is also the most powerful medicine on this planet. I'm
Mm-hmm.
talking about oral language and human communication. And of course, human communication is the transmission of meaning from one person to another, from one society to another, to one group to another. And we use it with oral language. And language, of course, is a set of symbols governed by rules and shared by a community. How you communicate determines where you are going to live. How you communicate determines where you're going to work. How you communicate determines the quality of the relationships that you have with others. Oral language is how we organize our societies, how we organize our families, how we organize our communities. Oral language is how we regulate our communities, how we navigate our communities, how we create in our communities. But few people are really aware of the science and the art that goes
Mm-hmm.
to oral language. The marketers are quite aware of it. I had a good friend who was a experimental psychiatrist, and he designed showrooms for Chevrolet. He designed showrooms so that when a person walked into that showroom, they wanted to buy a Chevy.
Mm-hmm.
See, communication is the bond that holds our societies together.
That's right.
But unfortunately, the art and the science of communication is not something that is widely spread in the African American community. You know, oral language, the development of oral language in the slave community was one of the tools that helped to free the slaves. Learning how to read, learning how to understand oral language
Mm-hmm.
enabled that slave to gain power, to it helped that slave to have a relationship with the master that in a sense diffused the master's power, because that slave
Yeah.
was now beginning to understand, and that slave was beginning to share that information with other slaves, and freedom became just around the corner. But let me get more basic to this speech language pathology thing that I'm talking about. You know, I'm
Mm-hmm.
probably the only African American male in the state of Illinois with a comprehensive speech and language clinic.
That's
And
right.
how many African Americans do we have? You know, the practice of speech language pathology deals with the application of non medical methods and procedures for the identification, the measurement, the testing, the appraisal, the prediction, the habilitation, the rehabilitation, and the modification related to communication, disorders of speech, disabilities in language, voice, swallowing, and other related thinking with language. We are the ones who diagnose and treat those conditions. And I know everyone has had some experience with a person who has had difficulty communicating,
Absolutely.
difficulties using language, difficulties being understood, difficulties remembering language, difficulties using language. It has been a problem with many people, so that nobody has gone untouched by communication disorders. What I was really glad to see just a couple of years ago, the World Health Organization recognized oral language disabilities as a legitimate disability. The World Health Organization, filled with just brilliant scientists and people from all over the world, thought that the only disability in communication was deafness and blindness. But
Mm-hmm.
they soon began to realize by the great work that was done in speech language pathology right here in America and in the United Kingdom, they began to realize that, hey, we are losing the valuable resource of many human beings because we not addressing speech and language disorders in that community, enabling them to be able to actualize their full potential. You can look around you. I know everybody knows somebody who has a speech and language issue that have been able to achieve great standards in many different fields. We have seen people overcome many conditions, but we have seen too many not have access to speech and language pathology services. When I came into the field in 1982, there were 60,000 speech language pathologists in the United States. Today, there are 200,000 speech language pathologists in the United States because of the great need and the understanding how it can play a significant role in improving the quality of life of many individuals.
Well,
I,
Arnell, can I ask you at this point, how many of those speech language pathologists are African American?
well, Unfortunately, when I came into the field, there were about 2%. Now, unfortunately, it's still around 2%.
Hmm.
But when I came into the field, Hispanics were about 1%. They're now about 4 or 5%.
Mhm.
Asians were less than 1%. They're now about 2, 3%. The Department of Labor has said that the field of speech language pathology is the fourth whitest profession in America, behind farmers, veterinarians, and mining engineers. Speech language pathology is the whitest profession.
So why do you
Whitest
think
profession
we
in America.
have this drag, in
We,
terms of
we, we,
numbers?
have, we have this drag because of systemic racism,
Hmm.
discrimination, and lack of hope and motivation within our own community. Remember, it has not been too many years since it became legal
Hmm.
a black person in America to read, to learn how to read. Remember, we've had to have all sorts of laws and regulations and presidential proclamations to
Hmm.
allow us to have access to higher education. This is where we are going to learn the science and the art of oral language and communication. The entry level degree for a speech language pathologist is a master's degree. And then
Right.
you have to take a national examination. You have to complete a clinical fellows year working directly under a certified licensed speech language pathologist. Many schools have not accepted blacks being capable of becoming speech language pathologist, somebody who could master, say, in this country, the English language, so that
Oh,
they could master it to the point to where they could diagnose and treat oral language disorders.
well, I
So,
know that we had, because I'm a speech pathologist. I worked at for Chicago Public Schools for 35 years as a speech pathologist, and I still continue to work contractually. Um, but I remember at CPS, there were individuals who had bachelor's degrees and they worked as speech assistants.
mhm,
And that was a large population of Black, workers in that program. I believe that Dr. Roberts, if you remember
Dr.
her,
Joanne
she,
Roberts, one of
Joanne
my
Roberts,
mentors.
yeah, yeah, she started that program. And then after a significant number of years, they dismantled the program. And during that period, a number of those speech pathologists, those speech assistants tried to go back to school to get their masters. So you had your local schools that they would try to get into. St. Xavier, I think, was one.
Mhm,
Uh, a number of people, some people try to go to, was it Governor State?
mhm,
um, you only have a certain colleges that actually offer the program.
mhm. Well,
And I don't know if
to this
I don't
day,
know if that
this is
number has increased.
2022. This is 2022, and I'm the only black man that has ever graduated from the St. Xavier University's speech language pathology undergraduate program. I'm the only
Mhm.
black male to have ever graduated from Northwestern's University's speech and language pathology program. That it's that racism,
Mhm.
it's that expectation that we cannot do it. And
Mhm.
that expectation that we have not can't do it has even poisoned us into thinking that we cannot do it in many cases. I saw at St. Xavier, I saw young black females that had came out of black schools as valedictorian, the top of their class, brilliant
Mhm.
young ladies. And I saw that racism in the white instructors that to deny them an opportunity to learn is really what they were doing, denying them an
Mhm.
opportunity to learn. While I was building my private practice, Of course, because I have a family and children, I had to work a job while I was building my practice. I worked at the University of Chicago hospitals. I worked at St. Joseph's Hospital and Providence Hospital of Cook County. And I saw how the lack of communication, the lack of adequate communication was denying so many people adequate medical care.
Mm,
And it was not just on the patient side, it was on the medical staff side. They lacked cultural competence.
mhm,
They communicated with the patients, turned the patients off. I saw, especially in the early intervention program, in the 0 to 3 program, in the new baby clinic, I saw where the doctors, the way they talked to new mothers would not return to the clinics.
sure.
They would not return. And some of the physicians said, well, how come they didn't come back? I said, who would want to come back to you? So and they think that because they have that little knowledge, that
Mhm.
gives them some sort of right to mistreat people, to look down
Now,
on,
this
to
is
talk
this
down
is
on.
where you come in as a speech pathologist. I'm sure from looking at your bio, you have provided consultation in a variety of arenas to address just so an issue such as this. Am I correct?
Exactly. Before I went back to school, I went back to school at a later age. I was a Illinois Department of Public Aid caseworker. Work in my area was the South Shore area of Chicago, the Southeast side. And I saw then that it was not poverty that was holding my people back. It was not poverty that had them locked in the ghettos. It was a lack of communication. It was a lack
Mm-hmm.
of communication skills, and the schools were not adequately servicing them.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't give. They don't teach listening in the
Right.
schools properly. They don't teach children how to listen. The public schools was simply teaching kids how to follow schedules and
Mm-hmm.
complete tasks.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not what all schools are doing.
That's
I
right.
saw the parochial and the Catholic schools was teaching kids how to take tests. That's why
Mm-hmm.
so many of them become bureaucrats and teachers themselves. I saw some of the elite professional skills teaching kids how to solve problems with language.
Mm-hmm.
I saw the executive schools teaching children how to use language to control people, how to be bosses. So
Mm-hmm.
we have to take control of our schools. We have to take control of the communication in our communities. We can't let multinational corporations socialize and educate our children. We have to take back control. We cannot let people become children and adults become so engrossed and entangled and engaged with an art and not be artists themselves. We can't do it because we are losing our people. Our numbers are shrinking. Our value is declining. And it can be tied right back to our communication level.
Well,
How
you
are we
know,
see how we communicate determines, like I said, where we live. It determines
absolutely.
where we work. We have to take it seriously. How many people are reading to improve the quality of their lives? You're
That's
not
right.
improving the quality of your life by following the sports page. You're
Mm-hmm.
not improving the quality of your life by reading the news that's simply, in most cases, negative.
Mm-hmm.
We have to, you see, there's only a small population who are what we call competent readers, about 10%. We still have 30 something percent of Americans are illiterate.
Mm-hmm.
They don't
Well,
read at all.
this this whole social media piece. I know, like, we have a website,
Hmm.
and so we have a website manager that we're working with, and there's always this conversation now about, well, You know, people don't really want to read much. People want to just put this little information out here and keep going. You
They want
know,
to look. They
catch a
want to look.
line.
They want to look. They want to
Right, they
look.
want to look, and they don't want to read, and I see also our pragmatic language skills being seriously impacted,
Yes.
where people don't, you know, especially with all of the texting and the emailing, and there's a difference when you're having a conversation face to face with someone,
You
as
know,
opposed to when you're just putting something out there on a text message.
I've tried for years to have speech language pathology included in church uh, first aid groups. I've tried to
Hmm.
have speech language pathology included in health fairs. I've
Hmm.
tried to have speech language pathology included in business seminars. But
Hmm.
what I have found is that most people are simply interested in insurance and selling goods and selling clothes and selling cars. There is no value to the human mind, it seems. They only want that mind to be trapped into some sort of psychological consumerism. They only want that mind to be able to buy something instead of creating something. So, in
Hmm.
order to create, you have to have the language to create.
That's
And
right.
language is in every field. There is no
Hmm.
field that does not involve language. And how much attention do people pay to how we communicate? Very little. We have, and the real tragedy of it is that many people don't know how to listen. They don't know how to listen. What they do know how to do is they know how to look and see. But that looking and seeing is so fleeting and is so misleading that it's of no value. It's the
And
same
Arnell,
as
I
this
think that's why we have so much
crime,
violence today,
so much
because
violence.
people go from A to Z. Okay, there's no in between, there's no compromising, there's no understanding, you know, trying to figure out what's going on here or what else I could do. They go from A to Z. You said something to me that I didn't like, boom, you know, I'm going to shoot you.
Hmm.
You
Hmm.
know, I mean, that whole area of pragmatic language is not being developed.
Not at all. The vocabulary
It's not being
is,
developed, and the
is not
vocabulary to use it is not being developed.
is not being developed.
I had Adrian Hunter from Ivy League Tutoring was on our podcast last month, and he was showing me um, in his office the reading material that they're giving our children now in the schools at fifth grade versus the reading material that was given to us 20 years ago,
Yeah,
30
but
years ago. It's a whole different level of reading. It's much more simplistic.
yeah,
Um,
yes,
it's not as much thought that has to go into it.
it's a dummying down. It's a
Hmm.
dummying down of the English language to satisfy a few people who are selling those books and only make those books available. But you know what I've seen, because I have been involved for a number of years since 1998 in this whole thing about neuroplasticity. And
Hmm.
what I have seen people of influence. I saw a Barrington parent group offer a neuroplasticity auditory training program to their all of their first graders. And what this
Okay, so
does,
before you continue, explain what you mean, because I know what you mean by neuroplasticity of the brain, but explain what that means.
well, not too many years ago, they discovered that the human brain can change. You know, it was
Hmm.
once thought that once you were born with all of the neurons, you were born with all of the cells that you were ever going to have. And it was up to the environment to help you to develop those cells into where you could be adaptable, you could be useful in the community, you could function in the community. But the neuroscientists have discovered that the human brain is capable of changing its structure and its
Mhm.
function. The
Mhm.
human brain is capable of producing new cells every day. We're not born with a certain set number of cells. Now, this whole
Absolutely.
thing about the neuroplasticity says that the human brain can change its structure and its function. I
Mhm.
work a lot with children who are neurocompromised, children who are born who've had strokes in utero, children who've had certain viral conditions, bacterial
Mhm.
conditions that have damaged their brain. I work with
Absolutely.
patients who have had adult patients and even some young people who have had strokes that have damaged their brains and impeded and impaired some of their function that they had developed. And this neuroplasticity theory says that, and it's a biological fact, that if you give the right stimulation, that
Right.
this brain can repair itself.
That's
This
right.
brain can regain function that it has lost. And so we saw that parents in um, Barrington were giving their children a training program that increase their ability to remember. It
Mhm.
increased their ability to attend to
Mhm.
auditory stimuli. It increased their ability to process things that they were heard. It
That's right.
increased their ability to sequence information that they heard. Now, they just didn't give them a stack of books to read. They gave them a program that made their brain more powerful. And where are we? We're still
Mhm.
at the stage of saying, try to read 10 books a summer. Well, now these children are reading hundreds of books a summer,
Mhm. Mhm.
gaining knowledge. These are the children who will be the bosses. These are the children who will be solving problems with language. Well, we can do the same thing. In my travels to Africa, I saw young children, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, speaking 4 and 5 different languages
Absolutely.
and living in poverty. And here we have middle class Black children living in middle class homes with middle class parents and so called middle
They
class
barely speak
are
English.
having difficulty learning one language.
Mhm.
What is that about?
That's
That's
right.
about the fact that there are people around him who don't have adequate communication skills, and they are wrapped up in simply providing things, giving things, having things. This is why a lot of this violence comes from, is
That's
because
right.
now life is not as important as having something. As having shoes, as having a car, as having clothes, as having weave, as having all kinds of things that are not very useful at all, things that will soon be in the garbage can. And life itself is worth nothing, they think, without those things. We got to reverse that trend. We got to reverse it if we are going to survive, because there are people in this world that see us as a problem and
So,
not.
Arnell, as a speech pathologist, how do you see our role in making this change? What should speech pathologists be doing to
Well,
make the change? Because I know most speech pathologists are working on articulation, they're working on vocabulary, they're working on some language processing skills and some pragmatic language skills, and they're working on stuttering, and some voice.
well,
What
there,
should
there,
speech
there's
pathologists be doing?
in the United States, the majority of speech language pathologists work in the schools.
That's right. I
They
think it's
work,
like 53%.
and that's a good thing in
Mm-hmm.
one sense and a bad thing in another. In the
Mm-hmm.
good sense, it's because federal law mandates that all public school children, all public school students should have access to adequate speech language development. That is a mandate. If a
Mm-hmm.
child is showing difficulty in learning in the public school setting, they have a right to receive speech language assessment and speech language therapy if it is warranted. That's a tremendous plus.
Mm-hmm.
That's a real good right in a sense. But what do we see happening? These schools are run by individuals in many cases who do not cherish human life. They cherish their position, they cherish that little home that they have, they cherish that little vacation that they have, and they go to these colleges and universities and get the necessary credentials to be a teacher. But the last
Mm-hmm.
place they should be is in a public school where there are young minds developing and growing and trying to achieve. So the speech language pathologists that are often trapped, they are confined, they are restricted in what they do. I have had speech language pathologists tell me that their administrators tell them, no, you don't work on reading, you work on speech articulation. And the
Mm-hmm.
Department of Education has very clearly stated that the speech language pathologist who is properly trained and educated is the expert in oral reading.
That's
You
right.
see, these administrators, they pretty much do what they want to do. And if nobody, and especially the parent, if the parents don't push back, their child is going to lose out. You know, there's a little procedure in the public schools here in Chicago where every child, it seems like, that comes through the system needing speech language pathology service is given 30 minutes of therapy. And in
Mm-hmm.
most cases, it's in a group.
Mm-hmm.
In many
Mm-hmm.
cases,
So
that's
how many minutes are you actually going to get, in a group for 30 minutes?
yes. So
Mm-hmm.
really what happens is they're put onto an escalator. And that escalator takes them from one grade to another without very little happening inside of their brain in terms of it changing, in terms of it growing, in terms of it becoming more powerful, and most importantly, in terms of its learning and finding happiness, true happiness in its environment. So, what do? We got to get these children off this escalator because that's what they're
Mm-hmm.
doing. They go from one teacher, one grade to another, and before you know it, they're out of school. I see children go into speech therapy in kindergarten and still
Mm-hmm.
speech therapy in high school
In
for
high
a
school.
problem that should have been fixed in a couple of months at the most.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because in a lot of cases, their hands are tied. The speech language pathologists' their hands are tied. Their hands are tied because the administration will not accept and let them do what they have been trained to do. And their hands are tied because in most cases the numbers are too great. In the
Well,
special
the other
department,
problem with that, Arnell, is a lot of these administrators really don't understand what the speech pathologist, the value and the ability of the speech pathologist on their staff. They don't know. A lot of these administrators do not understand special ed.
no.
Like you say, they have the degrees and the credentials, but what does that say that they actually know?
Well,
And a
see,
lot of even a lot of teachers don't know. When you talk about speech pathologists getting involved in reading
hmm
and teaching phonological awareness
hmm
skill, even a lot of speech pathologists aren't doing that.
no, no. Many of them um, accept the role that they have been handed. They accept it and they won't fight back because they that paycheck is more important than their integrity. That
Hmm.
paycheck is more important than their ethical commitment.
Hmm.
That paycheck as more important than their moral values. And they will sacrifice themselves in that sense. I've seen it. I oftentimes have occasions to evaluate children and go into the public schools to offer the results of my evaluations. And I've seen what the speech language pathologists in the public schools have to go through. They're
Mm-hmm.
told what test to give, not what test is most appropriate for that child.
Mm-hmm.
They're told what test to give because they have limited time.
Mm-hmm.
They have limited time. But that's not the case all over the place. I've seen some speech language pathologists doing wonderful jobs, doing
Absolutely.
wonderful jobs. I've seen some speech language pathologists in the preschool setting, in the kindergarten, on the playground, monitoring, listening to what the children are saying and how they are saying in case there might needs to be some sort of intervention. I've seen that. I've seen them spend a lot of their own money to
Absolutely.
supply materials and things of that nature to help the children. Oh, listen, there's a lot of good ones in the schools. And
Mm-hmm.
probably why we've been able to maintain that mandate that we be included in all special education cases.
And
But
see, as I listen to you, we have the direct services that we
Mhm,
provide, but there's also um, an area that really needs to be broadened, and that's with the consulting of the people that you're working with.
mhm,
You know, that whole consultation piece,
mhm.
consulting with the
Well,
teacher, consulting like you're consulting with corporations, you know, because of where communication is everywhere.
that's right. Well, and I've done quite a bit of that. I've done that with banks. I had
Mm-hmm.
one contract with uh, one of the banks that had hired a lot of software engineers, and these software engineers were from Taiwan, and their English was very poor because they had such a strong Chinese accent. And when they would go around to the different sites of the bank to help in the different branches, the people there couldn't understand them. So the company hired me to help them with their accents so they could be better understood.
Mm-hmm.
I got a call from IIT wanting to know if I could help because they had more Chinese students than they had Caucasian students.
Mm-hmm.
But the Chinese students were having a very difficult time getting jobs, and they were brilliant in their fields.
Mm-hmm.
Because of their accents, they had very difficulty. I was contracted by the Catholic Church, who was bringing um, priests in study to the United States to study in the Catholic seminaries. But the only way they could stay is they had to be proficient in English. And
Mm-hmm.
we worked a lot with that. But I've also had companies to come to
Mm-hmm.
help employee communication.
Absolutely.
I've had actors and singers wanting to improve their skill. They didn't have speech disorders,
Mm-hmm.
articulation disorders or voice disorders, but they wanted to enhance their communication. And so we
Mm-hmm.
do a lot of that too, the enhancement of communication. But right
Absolutely.
now, our primary focus has been on people who have disorders, Parkinson's,
Yeah.
people who had strokes, people who have tardive dyskinesia, people who've had chemotherapy and now have fog in the brain, people who have had surgery. We're working an awful lot with children who have who have good intelligence but are poor readers. I'm right now. I'm on the board of the Dyslexia Center of the Scottish Rite Masons, um,
Mm-hmm.
helping with this whole issue of dyslexia. A
Mm-hmm.
major study that was done in California showed that 95% of the people admitted to psychiatric hospitals have speech and language impairments. So a lot of
Mm-hmm.
times I want to ask, what comes first, the speech and language impairment or the psychiatric disorder?
It's
In
a
Illinois,
communication problem. It's a communication problem.
it's
Most of
a
the
communication
problems that
problem.
you have with the,
That's
especially
right.
with the students, with the behavior disorder children in the schools that were the ones that have been labeled with behavior disorders.
Social emotional disorders.
It's communication, not able to communicate their
I
feelings.
provided services in therapeutic day schools where kids were labeled emotional behavior disorder. And I saw 90% of those children had speech and language disorders. In the prison system, there's a very, very high population of people with communication disorders, speech and language disorders. I know in Illinois, they had proposed to do a dyslexia screening with all inmates because they saw that many of the inmates could not read. Could not read. So, what choices are you making in life if you cannot adequately gather information about your environment?
That's right.
You cannot look at it all. You cannot hear it all. You have to read. You have to read to gather information in a short period of time. And if you cannot gather that information in a short period of time, you are left to depend on what you see and what you hear.
That's right.
And that puts you at a great disadvantage, disadvantage. And it causes you to make judgments, to make decisions that are detrimental to yourself and others around you.
That's right. That's right. You are absolutely right. And
Now,
then
one of the big things that I see, and we're trying to work on that, and that is cultural competency in our medical community. When we have an extreme shortage of Black physicians in all fields of medicine. And so therefore, many in the Black community, they have to communicate with others, with other ethnic groups who have different values, different expectations. And if they are not culturally competent, we're going to have a very difficult time exchanging information that's going to be for the betterment of our health. And in a sense, we say, well, what do they care? They're getting paid. What do they care if their patient dies from things that could have been helped quite easily had there been adequate communication?
And it has to be adding to the physiological health, of our people, because we're already under a lot of stress from, the oppressive acts that we have to experience on a daily basis. And now you can't communicate your thoughts and your feelings to other people. You're not able to, as you say, acquire the knowledge that you need from your environment. And so it just adds to the oppression and the physiological health and mental health of our people.
I would recommend that people go see this movie. It's starring Common and Keke Palmer, called Alice. And it shows the power of reading. It shows the power of reading. The setting is 1973. And there are some Black people in rural Georgia who are still see themselves as slaves on a remote plantation run by a psychopath. And they are cut off from the outside world, cut off from communication. And they are acting like slaves, being treated like slaves, being lied to by a psychopathic master. And they think they are slaves, and they think that they are alone in this world. Now, this is 1973. But one of them is taught how to read and learns that she has been lied to. That's Alice, that she has been lied to. And it eventually leads to their emancipation. But you got that's a powerful story that Common in there.
Sounds like a powerful story. It's called
Oh,
Alice.
it's a powerful story. And it talks about It shows
Mm-hmm.
the power of reading and
Mm-hmm.
how reading can change the quality of your life. It can take you from slavery to freedom. And
Mm-hmm.
right now, we are still in a form of psychological slavery.
That's
You
right.
know, I had a child, 6 year old. I have a diverse population in my clinic, and a 6 year old white boy was looking at some pictures with me, and I showed him a picture of a football game. And I asked him, I said, "What is that?" He said, "Buck ball." I said, "What?" He said, "Buck ball." I said, "No, that's football." That ain't what they call it. Buck ball.
Mm-hmm.
I hope people understand the implications of that in
Mm-hmm.
2022. So, speech language pathology, I'd like to see it taken more seriously by church.
Mm-hmm.
You go to a health fair in a church, you won't see a booth. You won't see a table where they're talking about speech language pathology. And
Mm-hmm.
we look at all the high blood pressure, and we look at all the diabetes, and we look at all the cancer in our communities. That causes communication problems.
Mm-hmm.
Speech
Mm-hmm.
language pathologists need to be there. I've tried, but I'm just one person.
Right.
I think we have to have some of our leaders,
That's right.
pull us up, help us to be more exposed, help
That's,
us to being able to share our knowledge, to share our art, because others
mm-hmm.
are not going to do it. They're not going to do it. When I was at the University of Chicago, oh, they loved me there. I became
Mm-hmm.
an integral part of the neonatal intensive care unit
Mm-hmm.
where they were struggling to enable babies, fragile babies, to be able to learn how to take oral food. They were
Absolutely.
struggling. The nurses, with all their skills and know how and experience, were struggling to adequately feed fragile infants. They would start out, and in many cases, they were causing aspiration. They were causing irreversible respiratory diseases by the materials entering that fragile baby's lungs. So I told them, why don't you listen to the swallow? And then you can just put a little in there and
Mm-hmm.
listen to hear what happens to it. Listen, that procedure was accepted all over the world. I traveled all over the world presenting, screening pediatric dysphagia with cervical auscultation.
Well, do you feel that in the universities that they are really addressing the broad array of areas that speech pathologists can provide services in? You know, I mean, people go work in the schools
At,
and
at, some,
they go
at
work
some
in
universities,
clinics, but
at
are
some
they
universities,
really stressing this in the universities?
At some universities, they are, but the majority of universities are trying to supply speech language pathologists with this critical shortage of speech language pathologists in the schools. So
Mm-hmm.
they're pumping out speech language pathologists in the schools. I just did a Zoom seminar lecture for Tennessee State University.
Mm-hmm.
Tennessee State University, we would think is a black school. The majority of the students on that Zoom were white,
Mm-hmm.
were white females. We saw Howard University discontinued its speech language pathology program at the undergraduate level. We see many of the black schools struggling because they cannot get the support. They can't get the support from alumni. They can't get support from the community to encourage the development of speech language pathologists. It we're going to need speech language pathologists to help us out of this fog that we're in. We're going to need somebody who understands that oral language is the most powerful weapon on this planet, that oral language is the most powerful medicine on this campus, on this planet, that human communication is the bond that holds us together. Human communication is how we create, how we
And
raise.
I just look at how the mainstream has taken our language, a lot of our language patterns, our language expressions, um, our vocal expressions and music has become a part of just the mainstream now. You know, that have come from Black people. The way we
Well,
sing, a lot of our expressions, you know.
but that's believe me, that's a very small population. That's what the mainstream media will put out there. But
Okay,
you better believe that the majority of the American population is not into that. And as a
but
matter of fact, they
that's a
look
critical. That's a
they look
very
at it, they look at it as as degrading. They look at it as dehumanizing. They look at it as less than human. You
but
know,
that's a very
why
critical.
did all those people vote for Trump? They think it's a joke. Remember, I just said buckball. Buckball.
Mhm,
Yes,
mhm.
70% of the players in the NFL are black. That's buckball.
And
Now,
see, Arnell,
when
this
they
is
play buckball, no, they won't play buckball, but you better believe they will have a business that will have a business related to buckball where they
mhm,
will make a ton of money, will never
absolutely.
set foot on a football field.
That's right. But what's so critical about what you just said is because people are not reading and they're watching mainstream media, and what's on mainstream media, they're taking that as, oh, this is how it is.
This
When
is
there's
how it
another whole
is.
world out here
How it is.
that's has a different reality, and especially when it comes to being successful in life.
Yeah.
This is not it.
This is why you have so many blacks left the city, left valuable land, valuable places
Mm-hmm.
right next to the largest body of fresh water on
I'm
this
telling you.
planet to
I'm
go
telling
out
you.
into the suburbs where the water is polluted, where the well
Mm-hmm.
water is green, because they wanted to have things instead of raising children to be able to create communities that could be self-sustaining.
Mm-hmm.
So we got a real issue with this language thing, and it
Right.
can all be related to how we communicate.
That's right.
Listen to what we're saying to each other. There's only a few schools in the United States that teach listening, and
Mm-hmm.
listening is an art and a science.
That's
I'm a
right.
member of the International Listening Association. Some of the top negotiators in the world are a part of this organization, and it's all about listening. We think
Mm-hmm.
we know how to listen, but I'll tell you, once you look at the science of listening, the art of listening, I don't think nobody is listening. We hear, but I
Mm-hmm.
don't think we're listening.
Not
We
listen.
hear, but we're not processing adequately what we hear. We're so focused on who is saying it and just overlooking the fact of what they are saying.
And how they're saying it. We want to be in. We want to be entertained.
We want to be entertained.
We want to be entertained.
We want to
Everything.
be entertained. We want to be entertained.
Absolutely.
We, we,
Absolutely.
we, we have to have immediate gratification.
Mm-hmm.
Immediate gratification. We cannot have delayed gratification in no sense of the word. We'll kill somebody that interferes with our immediate gratification. We'll take the life of someone who could save our life for
Mm-hmm.
immediate gratification. That's why you see the shooting down of babies, the random shooting and shooting people over a car. Shoot, like that incident that they just had out on 87th and St. Lawrence, where I think it was the newspaper lady. Now she's delivering newspapers, and they want to carjack her. They cannot take a car because they can't drive a stick shift. So they see the Amazon truck up the street. They scuffle with the Amazon driver, shoot him in the shoulder and in the thigh, but then they can't take the truck because they can't drive a stick shift. That's a communication problem. That's a communication because they're not criminals. They're not criminals. They are language deprived. They don't know the value of life. That's their language deprived. And so their value has been placed, the language that they know is the language of things. And as the text said, there's no end to the making of things. So don't get too attached to things because it's going to change. Just like the world has changed. One of the greatest awakening in human civilization came with the writing of the book. So we can transmit knowledge across generations. So people could learn how to survive and thrive in an ever-changing world. But we have some people that are trapped in a world that they don't see change at all. Because they don't understand the language of change. They don't have the language to support it. Language learning causes the brain to become very powerful. The activation, the blood flow to the brain makes it strong, makes it creative, makes it be able to remember infinite amounts of information. But you have some people can't even remember the ABCs. Can't remember the numbers. Don't know their address, and they 20 years old. They don't know the foundations or the pragmatic values of how to have a decent relationship, so they have 5 wives. They cannot have a decent relationship with the people in their community and build anything because they have this selfish, egotistical streak. They can't preach the right word because they're not sincere. In order to preach the right word, you have to be sincere and earnest. So you go into a church and you preach falsehood. And then you go home and you talk about the people you're preaching to. So it's all in the language. It's all in the language. It's all in the language.
This has been an enlightening conversation. As a speech pathologist, to other speech pathologists, we have a lot of work to do out here.
A lot of work.
A lot of work.
It's
And
our responsibility.
our tentacles need to be everywhere. There are so many areas, and you have definitely done that. You have definitely spread your wings and gone into many different areas with your craft, and it's been very beneficial to a number of people, I'm sure. And so I want to thank you for your service, and I'm going to let you have some closing remarks here because we are over our 9 o'clock hour, which is okay. But I'm going to let you have some closing remarks. I want you to let people know, your office is here in Hyde Park. But I'm just going to let you have some closing remarks here.
Well, I would just like for people to pay more attention to what you are hearing. Pay more attention to what you are saying. And I'm located right here, 5228 South on Blackstone Avenue in Chicago. I've been in business for 39 years. And there are other speech language pathologists in the area, in the community. You know, I have two nieces that are speech language pathologists. One of the little guys I serviced one of my first year when I went in to speech language pathology. Now he has become a speech language pathologist himself and an elementary school principal. And I have been the president of the National Black Association for Speech, Language, and Hearing. I served 2 terms, 2 elected terms on that. With the American Speech, Language, and Hearing Association, I worked on the International Issues Board and the Multicultural Issues Board. So yes, I've been around and I've tried to spread the word, but I'm only one man crying out in the wilderness. It's about the communication, y'all. It's about the
Absolutely.
communication.
Absolutely.
Don't let them fool you. Don't let them make you think that being a basketball star is all that there is. Don't let them make you think that being the top lawyer who has no scruples or morals or value is a good thing. Don't let them make you think that being a doctor who is culturally incompetent a good thing. Life is the most valuable thing that we have. That's the best gift that God can give.
Absolutely.
The second best gift that God can give is to give you a guide, a good guide in life. And that good guide is going to be one who is going to cherish and protect and provide for your development in the area of human communication.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for taking out time to come on this podcast. We archive all of our podcasts on our website, so anybody will be able to come back and watch them at another time or whenever they so please. And this is just another wonderful Black person that we have out here in our community that is serving our community and is making a difference. And so we are so happy to have this opportunity to get to meet with you and talk to you, Arnell Brady.
Okay.
All right. So thank you again for coming. Don't forget, subscribe to Repair, Restore, and Grow Black Communities, and you will have an opportunity to win Marcus Garvey's message to the people that will be shipped to you free of charge, complimentary from Repair, Restore, and Grow Black Communities, because we know how important it is, as Arnell has spoken so much tonight, about reading and getting educated, be educating ourselves. So I want to thank you again and have a good night.
Thank you.